Hey, hello again. Thank you for joining me here on Movie Ninja. How's everybody doing? I know it's been a minute. All right. Hmm. This is more gonna be kind of like a random video. Probably just kind of reaching out, connecting just a little bit. Um, as far as like my activities and whereabouts, um, you know, summer did not end well. Not really. Um, it's autumn now, and I sound like way more serious than like I'm okay. I'm okay. I want to make that very clear to everyone. Just kind of like you know the content not really as frequent as it has been. Been working on a few things, kind of well outside of this space, outside the channel, that has just taken a lot of energy, from that creative endeavor. So, but how's everybody doing? Like I said, like the last couple of months for me, less than ideal, but we're moving on. All right. But just like I said, this is more like a random kind of like catch up. Aside from like movie watching, and I don't think I've ever shared this on this channel. I do have like other interests and things, and I know that other content creators they've given themselves like a bit of breathing room, like some space with regards to a very specific niche, and they go into other areas that of interest that they have. And I figured, hey, why not? Just putting this out there, just kind of like as far as like my own personal interests go, I do like like amateur gardening. Now, like when it comes to like gardening, as I wasn't aware of this until I kind of had the sort of like a greater means to do so. But I this is weird, but when I was growing up, I used to love pulling weeds, and I don't mean that hyperbolically. To me, there was like I think like some people like have like for like catching fish. Like you would say, oh, like this, like oh, how big was the fish that you caught? Oh, it was this big. And there were certain weeds that I would pull, and like the roots, the taproot would be like oh man, it was like this much is, and that's the thing about weeds and weeding. If you get the taproot, you know that weeds are always going to come back. They're part of the natural world, the natural cycle of things, but you know it'll take much longer depending on how much of that taproot that you get. And so I always liked it was one of those few yard chores that I actually like really enjoyed. For me, it was kind of like fun to just see like how much like I could clean up certain areas and like that. Recently, this last like year or so, I, I planted roses. I have several succulents, actually rather healthy. You know, that I have roses. I have rosemary, Russian sage. Russian sage, y'all, is resilient. It takes heat. It takes freezing. Really good. Like, and it's unless someone tells you, it's like it's very close to lavender in its aroma. It's very nice. Um, So as far as like that goes, I've grown mint in the past. Like the weather for mint, like mint is also fairly resilient, but the weather where I live is, it's it's one of certain like extremes. It's extreme drought, or it's extreme heat, or it's extreme now. like, well, not so much extremes like in terms of like rain. That's where the drought part comes in. But like mint is resilient. I had mint plants for over a year, but even with all of my catering to them, even with all of my, like the time and the energy that I was putting into them, the summer heat killed them, unfortunately. But yeah, I do enjoy gardening. I don't know. What about y'all? Do y'all do any gardening? I mean, because if you have the means, I'm saying, if you have the means, like, I mean, we all need to do yard work. As far as just like just maintaining our living space and like that. Also, preventing fines helps. Definitely. Um, but yeah, I'm actually, since, and once again, I appreciate the indulgence. But once again, hold on a sec. Because I mentioned my succulents. This is my green, one of my green babies. The only babies that I've had so far. These succulents, they're very resilient. They're very resilient. Now this one, you can't really get too clean of a view here, but this one sits on a. I don't even know how to like. It sits on an iron shelf that's in front of one of my windows, and it, as you can see, several of the stalks and several of like, and there's loads of petals like on them that they reach for sunlight, and I have it as close to the window as I can. So, but I mean, it is really something, and a lot of plants like do that. Like I've grown herbs before, and if you place like these plants next to a windowsill, I mean, photogenically, the photoreactivity for their photosynthesis, like they know where their food is coming from, or at least a component of it. Photosynthesis is not exclusively sunlight, but I mean, they're simultaneously taking in moisture. They're taking in nutrients from the soil that they're in. So I mean, like, but that to me that is amazing. To me that is they are reaching for that food source. They are reaching for it. That is just, it's wild. What can I say? A couple more of my succulents. And the trick, at least that I have sort of like seeing with succulents, is that if you ever feel that the soil is starting to dry out, then, hydrate properly, and there we go. Well, moving into, I mean, isn't it like that for all plants? Actually, the thing is, like, some plants actually are, some of them are semi-arid. It actually is quite easy to drown a plant, or to have a plant with what is called wet feet. So in other words, if your drainage isn't proper, like if it isn't sufficient, then essentially all of that, like what in the natural world would be like, either it would just settle elsewhere or it would become like runoff. It just literally drowns the roots. It just, they can't breathe. They can't do anything with it. But there's loads of gardening channels on YouTube that can explain it way better than I can. Y'all, I'm an amateur. So like when it comes to like a lot of this stuff, I'm just putting this out there as this is an additional interest type thing. But these guys, they're doing especially good, They're very they're very firm, but like you still, like any other living thing, you have to be careful with them. And I'm back. Oh, what's this? I'm enjoying, as much as can be enjoyed, some Lemon water. I think also I don't know. I think it's when you start to establish like your own space, you get this sort of like nesting sort of like thing. And this mug, I I got it on sale actually like at Dillard's. I know that sounds like bougie. Anybody who's like goes to Dillard's and sees like the massive price tag on everything, but this was on extreme discount. I mean, this is October, so they want to move out a lot of their uh, late summer merchandise, and they want to move in their November December holiday merchandise. So it's this thing like it's just I don't know. There's something about it I really did like the shape. I've just really I don't know. There's something warm about it, and it definitely goes with certain other articles like in my kitchen. So, like I said, I'm having lemon water, which I honestly do not recommend. The only particular reason that I'm having lemon water is for something very specific having to do with my kidneys. But can't go into that right now. Anyways, but also, yeah. 1 part lemon, 10 parts water. Trust me, just like it's as far as citrus drinks goes, the only thing stronger would be limes. And lime as an accent for just different drinks. I don't know about y'all, like maybe it's just like my palate, but like whenever I add lime to something, I get like a slightly cinnamony aftertaste, which a little goes a long way. There's a reason that like in drinks that lime is used like very sparingly, because if you actually add too much of lime to anything, interestingly enough, like that aftertaste, it turns acrid. So I mean, like a little definitely goes a long way. But aside from that, um, I've started or like restarted something that I've also just sort of like it's been on the back burner for a long time, and that is I like baking. I'm and I am the most amateurish baker, as we all do. Like the thing I took culinary arts in high school. I was pretty good with it. I mean, like the thing with like cooking is that cooking can actually be very very therapeutic. I mean, especially because you put in the work, and then depending on your method and whatnot, the result that you get is immediately enjoyable, like in a very very satisfying way. Baking, I find, is much easier. Like, I mean, when people get into cooking, they like to try like a lot of different recipes and different things. And they buy a bunch of ingredients and a bunch of supplies, and then they kind of like they start experimenting with things like really quickly. But the thing is like cooking, it is it's more science than art, It is art. It is like a lot of people they'll probably come at me it's like, hey, like what do you mean by that? But the thing is, I mean, with temperature calculation, with ingredients, chemistry, all this other like stuff. I mean, there's a reason why you have to go to school for this stuff. I mean, it's not just throwing things together in a pan and shoving it in the oven or putting it on a skillet and just like turning on a burner or something, and knowing the difference between different machines and different like settings and things like that. You can overdo things so very easily, and it's because of this that people get like very very overwhelmed, and that's why they kind of like give it up. But it's one of those things that like you'll always need to know. You'll always need this skill. You'll always have to, like, you'll always have to sustain yourself in some way. So I mean, like, you might as well, like, and I've gone through like weeks where like 3 days out of the week I've had cereal for like every for every meal. I think we've all had that at some point in our lives, anyways. But I mean, just like because it's just like one, it's like thrifty, and two, sometimes energy wise, like that's the thing, like because I know that like a lot of people, understandably, and I'm not judging anyone, but like a lot of people say like, oh, I don't want to, like, I don't really feel like cooking, so let's just order out. Honestly, I just buy like family size boxes of like cereal. And when I say cereal, I mean I mean like boring cereal, like Cheerios and cornflakes, just because I mean like they have a reasonable amount of nutrition, and as far as like even with milk, they're not really that like calorie dense. So I don't know. I probably do myself like wrong, like whenever I just kind of like have like that as like my primary like menu. But yeah, I leading back to it, I really do enjoy baking. I made my very first cookie cake, which unfortunately I no longer have photos for. But my very first cookie cake, it was for my oldest niece's 19th birthday. It was the very first time I had ever attempted a cookie cake. And part of it was like, well, like the risky thing was I didn't look up anything online for like suggestions on how to pursue this. I just kind of figure because amateur baker, one of the things I know, make cookies. So I started out with the primary ingredients for about a batch, or like a dozen chocolate chip cookies, doubled it up. And the way you kind of control just like things like with cookies or like with a lot of like baked goods like in general is just control your ratio of dry to wet ingredients. So I mean, after I did my primary like mix, and whenever a recipe calls for like water, I just add like milk. And now that being said, I have like a lactose problem, so I usually use like lactose free like milk. It's not as bougie as it sounds. There's a lot of places where you can get like at any you know on the corner grocery store. You can get like a bunch of this like lactose free options at like Walmart, Target, just like anywhere type thing. But that's what I use. Like if it calls for like water, I'll just replace that with milk. It usually gives it like a creamier result, anyways. But what I did, so I had this. I doubled the recipe for like about a batch of like a dozen chocolate chip cookies. I doubled it up, added milk, and as I was mixing, you can gauge exactly like how workable a dough is going to be based on like once you have it mixing in the bowl, you can sort of like gauge for yourself. Because problem is, I have no idea how much milk I added. It could have been 1 cup, it could have been 2 cups, 3.5. I have no idea because I just kind of kept adding more to it as I thought. Like, you don't want the dough to be oversaturated. Never. You don't want, like, if you have like a little like globlet like of it and it's like dripping, or if you're using oil for a different type of recipe, of like if it's too greasy. Unfortunately, yeah. A big thing about baking and really like any ingredient is like, once something is in your dough, it's there. When people say less is more, what they mean is you can add more as you go, but you can never take away once it's fully incorporated. So, like I said, I just kept adding a sufficient amount of milk to where it was still like workable. Got this big pizza pan, just like a half an inch, probably less than that, like a quarter inch deep pizza pan. Lined it up with baking sheets, baking paper. I love it. I love it better than shortening. I love it better than like butter. Simply because it helps to keep recipes lighter, and it's so convenient for cleaning up. If you could just take the paper, pick up whatever you're doing, and then just like the pan's clean. There you go. Don't even have to clean up after it. Big baking hack. Just use baking sheets. Just do it. It's way easier. But so got the dough, worked it, spread it out a bit, and the whatever dough that you have, especially for like cookies, for like cookie style like recipes, whatever you put on the pan, it will probably spread out about a bit like 2/3 more. So not twice size, but it will do like about anywhere from like 30 to 45%. So whatever you say, like it's like a dollop of something, because I did have it almost looked like a bread loaf, and I put it on that pan, and I wanted it dead center, but that was like a good thing. Like I still had enough, and that's where your wet ingredient ratio comes into play, is that you have, you know, to where it's malleable enough to where you can spread it out on the pan, but only, like, bear in mind it's gonna increase in size like significantly, so don't do it like too much. Oh, but that first time, like, I did it, and as it baked, it was so even, and I was able to get the coloring so right. It took over an hour to bake, also because you also have to bear in mind where your heating elements are in your appliances, particularly like your oven, because some people don't realize, like, if you're putting your cookies on the top rack, it's like, oh man, I can't bake because my cookies are always getting burned. It's like you check where your heating element is. You might not have done anything wrong. You follow the ingredient, you follow the recipe, you follow the ingredients, you did the time, you put the timer on right. It's like, oh, but like I keep burning them. If they're too low, they're gonna get burned on bottom. If they're too high, they'll get burned on top. And you could be doing everything right, but everybody just gets discouraged from like your initial setbacks. Anyways, but I kept it dead center in my oven, and I rotated it. Once again, because you want it to be evenly baked all the way around. And when you do enough cooking and enough baking, you can kind of gauge, this is where my hot spots are. This is where, like, okay. And you know from, like, if you've ever done like casseroles or tray bakes or anything like that, you can kind of say, like, okay, this one is a little bit crisper, this is a little like softer. So you just have to plan accordingly. So I would rotate this big cookie pizza, essentially. I would rotate it, and it was an hour and 15 minutes because I kept it on low heat. And a lot of people was like, well, don't you want to do it like medium heat or like high heat so it like cooks faster? Not necessarily, you know? Lower heat, longer cooking time, it'll be thorough, because you do want to make sure that you do want to make sure this is edible, you know. And so you rotate, but you do it at like a longer time, and I was so proud of the result because it was the first time try. I haven't done it like since. However, I, that first time round. And when my niece asked me, like, where'd you guys buy this? Did you get it like at HEB, or did you get it like at a bakery or something? Like, no, I made it. And she was so she was impressed by that. And it's like, yeah, I've started that again. And I'm trying different. I'm being ambitious, trying like pastry style like recipes and like that. But like, yeah. So I realize that this is not like, and I apologize to people that watch the channel because they want to talk about movies, or they want to hear me talk about movies. But like I said, this is just kind of me let my hair down just a little bit, talk about some of my other interests, catch up with you guys. What have you guys been watching? I've been watching Great British Baking Show. I watch Forged in Fire, Indian matchmaking, stuff like that. Just stuff that, like, I honestly haven't seen like too many like films in the last, in several weeks that is like really like, man, I need to talk about this. That's like, for me, when I want to talk about something, it's usually with a very considerable amount of enthusiasm. If a movie is good or bad in general. But like, yeah. I don't know. Movie Ninja has gotten a little bit like slack on his movie watching, and is kind of like, just had interest like in other things like recently. But anyways, like I said, I've started like baking again. I say I started baking again like I think, unfortunately, I've been doing it like a little bit like too much, and I've been having to give stuff away, and unfortunately I've been trying new recipes, and some of them haven't worked out. I do feel bad when a recipe doesn't work out because to me that's like that's ingredients gone to waste. I try not to be wasteful. I try not to. And just the fact like okay, like unfortunately people can't enjoy this, and just like and that's entirely on me. That's unfortunate. I'm mentioning all of this about baking because I recently got a very nice gift from a really good friend of mine. And at first I thought this person got it on Etsy. But like because yeah, once again, mug collecting, essentially like nesting. And this is my newest mug. And I think it kind of says everything it needs to say. Because and that's why I was like, did you get this on like Etsy or was this from like a Shopify channel or like something? Like, if you're listening instead of like viewing, it says all I want to do is bake cookies and watch movies. Like, yep. I'm not this has been my morning mug. This has been my morning mug for my tea like in the morning. So, but yeah. So like I said, just sort of like a little bit of like catch up. Been away for just like a little bit for about a minute, as they say. But like yeah, just things were a bit difficult for a while, and like I said, I kind of like for a little bit I've even sort of like moved away from just exclusively like watching films, like just like watching different series, things like that. But also indulging in other like interests. But I don't know. What do you guys think? I realize like if you've been with me through this entire ramble, I appreciate it. I completely understand that this is not like my usual content. I didn't start out this video with that particular like warning, but just kind of figured like, hey, as I always say, if you stuck around for the very end of this video, you are a champ. I appreciate it. And I do have a question. I tend to end videos like with questions. What types of like movies or TV shows have y'all been watching? I know that my friend Justin, he just a few weeks ago wrapped up the season 2 Reservoir Dogs, and I watched all of his episodes like on that. I don't have Hulu and I don't have cable, so unfortunately, I can only communicate in the comment section itself. And just kind of like work off the conversation that way. I still don't have Hulu because I don't have cable, but I am trying to be very careful to where I'm not stacking streaming services to where essentially it would just make up another cable bill of sorts. And Hulu you either have it with your primary subscriptions or it's like an add-on to like a few different things, like I think like HBO Max or like Disney Plus or something like that. But yeah, so I mean I still don't have it. I think it's strong enough. I also, well, for those that can see, okay, I'm also a very big proponent of media preservation and physical media releases. Why? Because distribution is always changing hands with different companies, and just licensing agreements always expire. So I don't exclusively rely on streaming platforms. It's like, man, I really love this movie, and then next month it's gone. And this could be like something either like mainstream or independent or documentary, just like whatever. So I mean, I do like physical media because it's a bit more permanent than that. But anyways, like I said, ending this video out. Forgive me. Sorry about that. But ending this video out, what have y'all been up to? Indulging in your hobbies. Like what are some of your hobbies? What have you been seeing? Let me know in the comment section. And once again, as I've said before, and I'll say it again. Thank you very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.